Across the Pond with Barry and Chad.
"82 episodes later, Chad, and here we are for yet another episode of Across the Pond." It's one of those podcasts, Chad, that really benefits from these two different experiences across this ginormous pond of ours. And at the moment, it's like boiling hot where you are in the UK
Yep.
and freezing cold here in South Africa. We're into the minuses, which is unheard of for South Africa. And you guys
Crazy.
are above 30, I believe. What's going on that side?
Yeah, just insane. It's been regularly 28 degrees, like you say, 30 degrees on some occasions. It's been quite the amazing week from weather. I would have thought by escaping Madeira, I'd arrive here and not have such a great situation. But obviously it's summer, Barry, so, summer's actually showing up for a change in London. Normally, you get a couple of days within your full summer season. But if we can get a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're not going to say no. We're definitely not going to say no. You on the kind of -2 today, I believe.
Yeah, I think today was the coldest day of the year so far. So I've been huddling under a blanket next to the heater the whole day, Chad. I haven't gone outside much. We went outside to the park for a little walk, and I froze my hands and everything off. So it's been quite cold this side. But I know when I talk to my Northern Hemisphere friends, they always be like, "Oh, it's Africa, man. Your cold is nothing," and I get that. But for us, it's
Yeah.
cold, Chad. For us, it's cold. I wanted to ask you. Another one of my friends in London told me that she thinks that 30 degrees in London feels hotter than 30 degrees in Joburg. Is that true?
Undoubtedly, yes. It's the humidity, dude. It's so humid here. Whereas, in SA, it's kind of that dry heat, I guess, depending on where you are. I mean, if you were in Durban and experienced that 30 degrees, how would that be like, Barry?
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. The humidity does make it a little bit tougher to kind of keep comfortable and whatnot. But at least you guys have got the right like infrastructure to control temperatures and stuff with
Yep.
heaters and air cons and stuff, I'm assuming. Whereas here we just kind of live by the seat of our pants, Chad, and we get the blanket out, or we get the trying to open the windows to get some fresh air in. So it's always good fun.
Always good fun. Well, for those of you who are tuned in live, really sorry we're 30 minutes later than we originally wanted to, go live. And it grates me, Barry, to pay for a sort of internet connection that's high speed, and then have my MacBook just decide to not receive that speed. My iPad's receiving it, iPhone's receiving it. Just MacBook was just refusing. So we've got a backup internet connection today just to get us live on the air because we can't skip our episode, right?
No, definitely not. And it's one of those things where we've been tearing our hair out for the last couple of minutes, and we're going to try and take a nice, calm, deep breath because we've got so much cool stuff to chat about. And Chad, hopefully this thing holds up for the whole conversation. But if you're listening to this right now, it did, and so that's awesome. But we got lots of stuff to chat about. So Chad, should we dig into the week that was?
Let's start.
The week that was.
The week that was, this week, like I said, traveled back from Madeira, so that was always good. Just been kind of unpacking the bags, getting the clothes back, washing, all that kind of stuff, Barry, all the admin, getting that all sorted out. And there's a never-ending list of admin to do. It just never stops. But obviously, the world keeps on turning and things keep on happening in the background. So, a couple of things we wanted to chat about with you guys today. Obviously, Monday, the beginning of this week, the 19th, was Freedom Day here in the UK. And obviously, I've seen many a meme and sketch from a cartoonist about what Freedom Day actually is and what it all entails. And it's not quite Freedom Day, but it's pretty close. And I guess depending on who you speak to, it's either a very irresponsible, reckless move, or it's not. You're not free enough. So it really is interesting because it does seem to be polarizing the population. How we're handling this, and I guess only time will tell whether it's the right decision or not. But essentially, Barry, masks no longer legally mandatory. So a lot of shops are still enforcing it. Some shops say, well, we'd like it if you wore one, but if you can't, it's fine. But I did walk into a shop today without one, and the shopkeeper wasn't wearing one. None of the other people in the shop were wearing We're wearing a mask. And so that was, quite an interesting experience, to be completely honest. Really quite an interesting experience. And obviously, I've yet to go and see, some theatre or experience any of these kind of big gatherings yet. But obviously been watching on the news and stuff, and people are quite pleased to have that little bit of freedom back. But what is quite ironic, Barry, is as this happens, what you have, and you and I had a bit of a back and forth, where you've got this NHS track and trace app that essentially has kind of a Bluetooth feature, and it's constantly monitoring who you walking by or who you're coming into contact with. It also has a QR code feature where you scan into various venues as you come in and out. But obviously, a whole bunch of politicians have had this app and have had it enabled. And it started off with the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, testing positive for COVID. So he tests positive for COVID, just the day before Freedom Day was about to happen, and as a result, Boris was told, well, he needs to isolate, and he decided initially not to, and that changed very quickly. Barry, I sent you. It was probably about an hour and a half later, where there was a mass public outcry. And very quickly, Boris realized that it was within his best interest to go into isolation. So now what you have is you've got Boris Johnson, obviously the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor. You've even got the head of the opposition party, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. All of these people, including the Health Secretary, all self-isolating in what some are calling Pingdemic. Being the ping of your phone to tell you to isolate. It's quite something to watch.
Chad, if you were writing this as a movie, this is what you would script, right? This is the sort of timing that you would script. At the moment that the UK are trying to get rid of the shackles, all of their top politicians get those dreaded pings, like you say. And it raised such an interesting discussion. Like, we've chatted before about how the British media has such power, and they really are like rabid dogs sometimes when it comes to these sorts of topics. And the fact that it turned around as quickly as it did, Chad, we had a good chuckle on WhatsApp talking about how quickly he changed his tune there. And it's a reminder that this thing's not over, right? And the Pingdemic is still with us. And especially as the UK opens up completely, you're going to get a lot more of those pings, Chad, because there's still lots of cases in the country. Even though the hospitalizations and deaths and stuff have gone down, I saw a stat a couple of days ago that you guys had 50,000 new cases in a day, which is a big number. And so those pings are going to be everywhere, Chad. And the question is, what do they mean and what do you do about them, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the question. And certainly, I think they're looking at the rules. Obviously, now that the politicians have been affected themselves, they're obviously a lot more interested in those rules. But yeah, I mean, I believe from sort of mid-August, those who have had 2 jabs, who have come into contact with a positive COVID person, don't have to isolate. So, does that change what the pinging does? Or, do the NHS, does the government realize that this app isn't quite as ready as they maybe thought it was? Because obviously there's an algorithm here, Barry, that scans how close you were to that person, ultimately, and how long you were in contact with them, and it then decides whether you need to isolate or not. Obviously, the next question is whether you can go and get a test and kind of, avoid the need to isolate if you're actually tested and show a negative result, which I think is logical and I think makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're going to have to figure out these kind of nitty-gritty details as we go forward, because as we chatted about multiple times in the past, you're never going to get to a stage where there are no pings, right? This thing's with us for a long time. You got to try and decide what is the kind of the risk you're willing to take versus the precautions you've put in place. And so far, the vaccinations have looked really, really promising. The numbers with vaccinations have been superb across the board. And so it's this continuous back and forth between desperately wanting to go back to normal, but do we still want to have some caution? Do we still want to have some things in place to kind of control things? It's very difficult to say. With every new variant that comes out, we're going to have this discussion again and again and again, Chat. So at the moment, it's about the Delta variants. But for the next couple of years, every single new variant, we're going to have to start talking again about masks and about track and trace and about vaccines and all those good things. And so, yeah, even on Freedom Day, Chad, where it feels like you could finally put it behind you, these discussions are still front and center.
Yeah,
And it's kind of crazy to think that 18 months later, Chad, we're still talking about this virus on this podcast, right? I mean, we've talked about COVID on basically every show from the very beginning because of our biggest story it's been. And it continues to dominate the headlines, continues to dominate kind of the discussions around the world. And yeah, it's crazy. I don't think we realize how crazy it's actually been. I think we're going to look back on this time, and this virus has taken 2 to 3 to 4. It's going to take 2 to 3 to 4 years of our lives, Chad, which is a very, very crazy thing to say.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I hope it is only that, Barry. I mean, this could go on for a lot longer, but we don't know at the moment. And you're so right. I mean, even just meeting up with some people that I haven't seen in some time, it's naturally the thing that everyone talks about. It's the thing to talk about, that you don't really have much else to talk about. It's talking about travel rules, how you've coped in lockdown, all that kind of stuff. And from some point of view, it gets exhausting continually talking about COVID. It really does. And so if you come across the pond and you really don't want to hear about it, I'm sorry, we get it. And on that note, we'll kind of swiftly move on, but keep slightly on topic, because the Olympics, Barry, the Olympics have started.
They have, Chad, and quite to the surprise of a lot of us. A lot of us thought this thing was going to be cancelled. It's kind of been in the air for a long, long time. Tokyo has gone into complete maniac. Just trying to figure out, how do you put on an event like this? How do you bring thousands of people from all around the world together and try and have a safe event? It's absolutely crazy. And of course, as would be expected, we started hearing about the first couple of athletes testing positive and having kind of issues, including some of the Bafana guys, Chad, which is not a good thing to hear about.
Yeah, I think that they were kind of among the first. I think that there was some Australian team where there was a concern, but I don't think in the end, I mean, there's been so much movement on this, but I think the SA, there were basically 3 football players, as far as I understand, and 1 on the kind of management team that all tested positive, which obviously caused quite a bit of a concern. And we obviously know that the Olympics are going ahead with no audience to kind of watch the events live, and naturally there's been you always have those kind of athletes villages where the athletes all keep together, and obviously there's a strong testing regimen and all the rest, but somehow there already are a couple of people who have tested positive. So I just hope that they're able to isolate it enough that the rest of the games continues, because what a wonderful time just to watch the Olympics again, and just watching some incredible human feats.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to watch. And what's cool about it, Chad, is you get to explore sports that you never usually watch, right? In the Olympics, you always find these very niche sports that everyone kind of grabs attention of, and for a couple of weeks, everyone's pulled into curling, or they're pulled into high jump, or one of these sports that you don't really think about throughout the rest of the 4 years. And it's a special celebration of human athletic achievements. I know when I sit and watch the Olympics and I see what these people are capable of, it makes you realize how incredible humans actually are. And some of the speeds and some of the feats and some of the things these people can do make us feel a little bit silly as we sit with our books on the couch watching from afar. But it's a really special time. I hope it continues. I hope it doesn't get cancelled at any stage. And I'm looking forward to making the most of Supersport's 8 or 9 different channels, Chad, and seeing what I can figure out from this year's Olympics.
Amazing. Spoiled for choice there, Barry. I don't even know how I'm going to be able to watch it. But you rest assured I will certainly be doing my best to try and get it up. And of course, we've got some very interesting rugby coming up in the next day or two. And of course, for the next couple of weeks, we've obviously had the first, I think it was the first 2 games that have been played so far of the Lions series, but they've kind of been like warm-ups almost. The first game against the Johannesburg side, the Lions, which did not go so well. And then second game against the South African A team, which was quite an interesting one. I mean, I was quite interested about that definition of the A team, because there were a lot of Springboks in that side.
It was a very strong A team, Chad. If that's our A team, I cannot wait to see the team we're going to field on the weekend, because there were some huge names in that A team. So yeah, the A moniker was a bit deceiving.
Yep.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens this weekend when we see the real Springboks play the British and Irish Lions. It's going to be an interesting game because both sides haven't had much rugby. Like they've been desperately trying to get a few warm-up games in, desperately trying to get some of the rust off. But it's certainly going to be a scrappy game, Chad. I don't think it's going to be the beautiful free-flowing rugby that we used to see in this sort of series. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for guys to get back into it. But I'm all keen for it. So every time you get a chance to watch the Springboks, it's exciting. And as World Cup champions, as defending champions, it's time to take on the Lions and see what happens.
Yeah, and we can't forget about that, the World Cup champions. I mean, I almost forgot about it the other day, and very quickly reminded myself of that incredible moment, when we took the cup home. So, definitely going to try and watch the game this weekend and the rest of the series. Very, very excited about that. Well, while we're talking about sports, all sorts of Olympics and rugby and all sorts of other bits and pieces, we've also got something else that happened interesting this week, Barry. While we're on sports, we might as well stay there. The first ever game of 100 cricket. Now, I don't know anything about this, but if there's anyone who knows anything about cricket, I put it down here expecting that Barry would be able to at least fill some stuff in for us, because this has been kind of hinted, I think, for a couple of years, almost 6 years, I think. And there's been a lot of cricket critics of this new format. Did you watch the game? What do you know about it, Barry?
Chad, so I'm a little bit embarrassed here because I didn't know about it until today, until I saw it on your list, and then I had to go and do some research. So it shows how much of a hermit I've been this past week and that I haven't been following. But I did some research, so I've got some information for you. So yeah, it's called 100 cricket, and the idea is that every innings is 100 balls, which is shorter than your traditional T20, which would be 120 balls per match, per inning. Sorry. And the whole idea is that cricket is trying to reinvent itself. It's trying to kind of get more supporters into the game. Unfortunately, over the years, we've started to see attendance in stadiums go down and down and down as the years have gone on. And people are trying to keep this game alive. And outside of Australia, India, and England, which are the three cricketing powerhouses, every other country is struggling to get people into the stadiums. So what we saw is a slow transgression from Test match cricket, which is the original form of cricket, which is at 5 days that only the true fans watch. Everyone else gets bored out of their minds. Went to 50 over games. They went to 20 over games, and now we had an even shorter format, the 100 ball game. And the idea is that every over is only 5 balls, Chad. They change ends every 2 overs, so the whole game is finished in about 2 and a bit hours, I think. So it's very, very short compared to some of the other cricket games, which is what they're aiming for. This kind of pilot program is happening in England, I believe, and I think they've got 8 teams competing, 8 men's teams and 8 women's teams, and the men and women are competing in parallel. So you can watch both men's and women's cricket in the same sort of time period, which is very exciting, and it's kind of hasn't been done much before, which is a bit of a shame because women's cricket is growing a lot. I think people don't realize how much women's cricket is growing, and so it's really cool to see it get this sort of environment. So they've got some of the biggest players in the world. They've kind of used some money to get some good players in. So I'm excited to see some of the games that are going to happen over the next couple weeks. And what's also cool, Chad, is a lot of the games are going to be streamed live on the Sky YouTube channel. Amazing. So for anyone around the world, regardless of like what your television situation is, you should be able to stream some of the games live, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that's where sport is going to go in the future, is that more and more of it's going to be streamed on the internet for anyone who wants to consume it. So I'm excited to see it, Chad. I don't know anything more than that, but hopefully that's a little bit of a teaser, a little bit of a tidbit for you to go and check it out. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I'm still a purist. I still think Test cricket is the way to go, but I understand that most people don't. And so if this brings more people into cricket, I don't mind, Chad. The more people who play cricket, the better.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad to have brought you to some new pieces of cricket. I never thought I'd ever see the day where I could say that, that I brought up onto your news feed a new tournament that was happening that was going to revolutionize the sport. You never know, Barry. It might be as big as T20 was. I mean, hopefully that is the case, because that'll be great, like you say, for female cricket, and just to kind of extend the audiences as well. Why not? On the sporting front, we've got a bit of a match going on as well between billionaires, and we kind of spoke a bit about this last week, where Richard Branson went up into the boundaries of space in his Virgin Galactic plane, and this week we've seen some opposition coming through, Barry. So the question is this a leveler to Branson's number 1-0, or is there something else at play here?
Yeah, Chad, it's a big discussion about whether is this ego, is this just billionaires fighting against each other, or are there other reasons for this space race? And of course, this is the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jeff Bezos, who was the richest man on Earth and clearly wanted to be the richest man in space as well. So he had to go up top and claim that prize as well. And the ex-founder of Amazon, with his new kind of, well, not new company, he's been running this company for a while, but his kind of focus now is Blue Origin. And we're watching now on the YouTube the kind of the spacecraft taking off, and he went to the same space that Richard Branson did, so just on the edge of space. It was only a 10-minute flight, straight up, couple orbits and straight back down again. And when he got down, Chad, he was absolutely like fascinating, and he was screaming. He was so excited. It clearly had a very, very big emotional impact on him. And yeah, a really, really cool moment for him to go and experience geogravity and to show what Blue Origin is all about. And for the first time, Chad, out of almost nowhere, we've got 3 or 4 different commercial space companies now taking people to space, which is very exciting. And so, yeah, whether he's upset that Branson beat him there by a week, I don't know. I'm sure he is a little bit. There must be some of that in the back of his mind. But Jeff Bezos went to space and came back alive in one piece.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. Just to watch those scenes. 10-minute flight, that's insanely short. Surely you'd stick around for a little bit longer, Barry. But there must have been some kind of safety concerns. I mean, I see, obviously, having watched the clip and comparing it to Branson's trip, this was on a rocket rather than a plane. The rocket doesn't look, if you look at it from a certain angle, it doesn't look like the best kind of thing to look at. But yeah, very, very interesting that the rocket technology was instead used. In terms of that and the technicality of that, how did the landing happen with the rocket? Obviously, different methods used between these two technologies.
Yeah, Chad, I'm not 100% up to date with the technical details, but as far as I understand, Jeff Bezos' one is much more like traditional rockets. So the idea is you put a little capsule on the top of a rocket, use the rocket to get you into space, and then you jettison the rocket and you bring the capsule back down to Earth. So you come down on a much smaller vehicle than you did in the rocket itself. What Richard Branson did was they've got a plane that takes the rocket up most of the way, and then they shoot the rocket off the plane in a way. So it's a little bit different in a sense. Like there was more rocket fuel needed on Jeff Bezos's than in Richard Branson's, because they're launching from a much higher altitude. And I'm not quite sure what the difference is when it comes to landing. I think they're both pretty similar in that sense. And it's quite cool to see 2 different approaches, and both of them work, and both of them proving themselves to be exactly what they need to, right? The reason it's such a short flight is because they didn't have a huge rocket. They don't even have fuel to kind of keep going forever. And so it's kind of a pilot project to kind of show that these companies mean business. And the fact that these CEOs are going up in these planes is a big kind of social trust thing to kind of trying to say to your eventual customers, listen, like we went up and we survived, you'll be just fine. And Chad, it's quite cool. What he also wanted to do was break some records, clearly. So he wanted to break the record for the oldest person in space and the youngest person in space. And so he took them both within his rocket. So not only did Jeff Bezos go, he also went with his brother, I believe, as well as an 82-year-old who became the oldest person ever to go to space, and an 18-year-old who became the youngest person ever to go to space. So quite a cool photo, Chad. And if you're on YouTube, you're watching it right now. That's something to frame, I think, Chad, if you're that 18-year-old.
Absolutely. Just imagine breaking that kind of record. So cool to see. And obviously, even the 82-year-old to be able to go up. I mean, she looks incredibly healthy. But what a great kind of record to break. And for me, it's just crazy that we're still breaking these space records. As kind of trivial as they may be. I still think it's completely changed the game of having to be an astronaut who's had to do millions of tests and have all of this kind of training. I suppose it's possible that these two individuals did too, but it doesn't feel like it. Do you know offhand?
I'm not sure, Chad. To be honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
I might have to do some more research and look back into this. But I'm sure that we're going to see more of these sorts of flights going forward, and everything is just trying to push these boundaries. You said these records, Chad. We're in the early stages of this. I know it feels like we've been going to space for a while, but it actually is only a couple of years that the Elon's actually like pushed this forward and made this possible. And now all of a sudden we've got all these companies trying to do the same thing. So the more companies you have in the space, the more flights we see, the more information we're going to get, and hopefully we start to build ourselves a proper space tourism industry. Because one of the things that I've been a bit frustrated with in the media is talking about how these billionaires should have spent all these billions of dollars on something else more productive than going to space, right? And there's this idea that they're throwing their money away. I saw someone tweeting saying that Richard Branson could have like saved a bunch of poor people and stuff, and it's so short-sighted to me because what people don't realize is how much technology comes out of this space exploration. So much of the technology that we use today, everything with our cell phones and the satellites we use, and everything relies on space exploration, space technology. And so you can see it as two billionaires going at it against each other and like just throwing their money away because these things are still quite expensive, or you can see it as opening up a new industry that's going to create new technology that we can't even imagine yet, and that's going to have huge impact for the rest of society. So it's a much bigger story than just a Bezos versus Branson versus Musk discussion, right? It's about opening up this industry and opening up space flights to everybody so that we can actually make the most of it and see if we can find some new interesting things that come out of it in terms of innovation.
I love how we starting new tourism, space tourism, when the tourism that we have on our own planet isn't even currently, fully functional. Anyway, I completely agree with you. I've seen a lot of calls as well about, the kind of opportunity cost of them going up and they kind of 10 minutes in the boundaries of space. But you're so right. I mean, they're actually doing humanity a favor in some ways, because it's governments could be spending all of this, and it's just these individuals who are kind of taking it upon themselves to fund all this research. And sure, there are profit goals there, and when they do commercialize this, they will certainly be there to benefit. But certainly I think the rest of humanity are going to benefit as well in some sort of way in the future too. So exciting to watch. We'll certainly watch the space. But for now, let's move on to our next segment.
Stuff I found interesting.
So, Chad, I have a bit of confession to make. I have become addicted to a computer game.
Ooh.
And I did not expect this. And it's not the kind of game that most people play. So I think I'm going to come off looking like a bit of a nerd after I discuss this, Chad. But that's what we're here for. We're here to be open and honest here and across the pond.
Yep.
And the game is something called Football Manager 2021. And it's exactly what it sounds like, Chad. You take control of a football/soccer team of your choice, and you try and take them to glory in whatever kind of format you want, right? So it's very different to FIFA, where you're actually playing the game and you're controlling the players and you're making the passes and whatnot. This thing, you are setting up the team, you are choosing the tactics, you are buying and selling players, and then when they get on the field, Chad, you have no control. Other than shouting some encouragement from the sidelines, you have to watch and see what happens, and then you live and die based on what's going on there. And the reason I wanted to bring it up was because, it's fun just because it's cool to be a manager, control all the various aspects of it. But what amazes me is the amount of detail that these guys have built into this game. This game is designed to be as good a simulation of reality as possible, right? So what these guys have done, Chad, have gone to hundreds of leagues around the world, crazy leagues, that the Polish 3rd division, the Colombian 4th division, crazy levels of detail. Got every single player from every single team, put attributes and personalities and rated all of these players and like created this insane database of hundreds of thousands of players into this AI driven system that then kind of puts these players against each other and like plots the way that these teams are supposed to play against one another. The detail is just insane, Chad. And I don't understand how it's possible. I don't understand why it works, but it is addictive because it is one of those games where if you like stats and data and kind of tweaking things and manipulating your team and whatnot, there are 1,000 different things you can do. There are press conferences, Chad. You have fights with staff members. The amount of detail and relevance. COVID's in the game, so if you start during COVID, your finances are way down and you don't get the gate receipt you should. It's unbelievable. And I don't know. I don't say it, Chad, but I'm amazed by the level of detail that people can put into a game like this.
Insane. I mean, that sounds really cool, and I'm glad you're joining the gaming crew, Barry. I think I've heard of this game before in the kind of previous versions and iterations, and it's never been one that's appealed to me because, you know, in terms of the stats and that kind of thing, you know, I don't feel like playing a game is, you know, typically a game is being able to control someone else, so, you know, feeling like you're someone else or in another world or in another kind of reality, I guess. And in some ways, I suppose you are here because you are the coach, but it's a lot more detailed than simply learning how best, you know, to pull off a particular strategy on the field, like you say in FIFA or whatever the case is. And I'm sure it kind of feels like one of those intellectual games in some way because you're kind of trying to solve a puzzle in a way as well. You're kind of trying to figure out, well, which players gel well together, you know, which, I guess, what you know, what combinations and the press conference, all that kind of stuff. It all sounds really quite realistic. So it sounds fascinating. I certainly need to give it a try. Do you know if it's only a computer game or if it's on other platforms too?
I'm not sure, but I would imagine it's just a computer game because you really don't need a console for this. It really is basically clicking around on different buttons, and while they have a game engine, it's not as realistic as FIFA or anything. So I would imagine it's just a computer game. I got mine through Steam, and so I think you can grab it on there. But it's like you say, it's a very niche game. It's not for everybody. A lot of people are going to be put off by the amount of detail and the amount of kind of analysis that needs to be done. Why I enjoy it is it's a very strategic. It's all strategy. Everything is strategy. You're trying to manage your finances, plus your staff, plus your players, plus your transfers in and out, and 1,000 different things. And like you say, you're problem solving in these multiple areas. And when injuries come, you have to deal with it. When your player wants to leave, you have to deal with it. And there's all these interesting sorts of dynamics they've built into the game. And it's really rewarding, Chad. What I've done is I've started in a team right at the bottom of English's like social division, and I'm slowly moving up with the goal of eventually trying to take them to the Premier League and to the Champions League one day.
Awesome.
And so it's almost like a rags to riches kind of journeyman story, and it is about the story, even though there's lots of data and lots of analytics. It's about, I feel emotionally attached to some of my players, Chad. Some of my guys that I've had for 3 or 4 years now, even though they're just little icons on a screen, I'm kind of attached to them because I've been talking to them. I've been praising them when they've had a good session. I've kind of been, you know, doing all these things. And so, yeah, I know I'm sounding like a bit of a nerd, but I think for anyone who likes that sort of strategy game, and if you're really into, you have to be into football, right? If you don't enjoy football, this is not going to be a win for you. But if you're really into football and you want something that's quite challenging and quite intellectual, and that you don't have as much control of as FIFA, like FIFA, once you get to a certain level, you can be really good at FIFA and you can win every game quite easily, right? Football Manager is very different. There are days where you can have the best team in the world and they don't show up, and that's kind of how life works. And what I'm fascinated by is I want to do some more research as to how the hell they made this thing. Because the complexity and the fact that they've got every league, you can play as Mamelodi Sundowns if you want, Chad. You can play for them for the whole career with all the detail, all the players up to date. It's unbelievable the amount of detail in this game. It's insane.
Incredible. That sounds really cool. I mean, I wanted to ask actually when you initially mentioned it and when you kind of do all the prep work and then you sit back and watch the game. I mean, are you actually sitting for 90 minutes and watching a game? You know, how does it work? How does that work? Is it a short preview of like a highlight summary of everything that happens? Because obviously, you know, in real life, players and managers watch back their games a number of times to kind of pick out insights of how the opposition played and where they let themselves down, all that kind of stuff. I mean, as a responsible manager, Barry, you can't miss any details now, can you?
Chad, if I had to watch 90 minutes every time they play a game, it would take me forever, dude, and I would lose even more time that I should be working when I'm procrastinating.
Yeah.
So what you do is you can choose the amount of detail you want to watch. So I'll just put on the highlights, and so something interesting happens, then I'll watch that. So if there's a shot at goal, if there's a good tackle, if there's an important moment in the game, it'll show me that, and that's normally enough to get a sense as to, is your formation working? Should you be marking differently? Should you be bringing a different player on? It gives you a decent sense as to what's going on. And what's quite cool is that the animation isn't just random, Chad. It's actually determines based on the attributes of your players. So the faster players are going to get round the slower players, and the taller players are going to win more headers than the shorter players, and all these sorts of things. So I don't know how they've managed to do it, but it really is amazing how they've managed to manifest this whole universe in this kind of virtual world. So no, they're not 90-minute games, Chad. They're probably about 5 to 10 minutes once you're watching just the highlights. But that allows you to get through a couple seasons relatively quickly, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend 6 months getting through a season, Chad, because you'll drive yourself insane.
No, naturally. I just wanted to ask because that does sound fascinating, having to kind of watch the games in some sort of way, which is cool. I guess you kind of get to see the players when they start to perform. Anyway, we spent long enough, I think, talking about professional teams and Barry as a professional football manager. I think let's go into a bit more of the real world, but keep looking ahead. Let's move on to the next segment.
Looking ahead.
Alrighty, looking ahead. Not too long ago, we spoke about Netflix, and Barry had this wonderful idea of adding kind of educational type content to their offering. And obviously that hasn't happened, but naturally, as I guess a lot of people expected, as the pandemic has kind of started to slow down a bit and countries are coming out of lockdowns and people are spending less time at home, the kind of insane levels of growth that Netflix has seen in their subscriber base over the last year has started slowing pretty dramatically. Actually, there is still a massive number of people who are subscribers, but they are actually the growth is slowing, but they're also seeing loss in subscribers as well, which is certainly an interesting kind of talking point, I guess. But obviously, as the platform has also been kind of competing against more and more competitors, we've got Disney Plus has picked up quite a bit in the last year. Obviously, we've seen the likes of kind of Amazon Prime and many others, too many to mention. Apple TV, obviously, with their own kind of original content, and Netflix has tried. I suppose they've tried with quite a lot of original content of their own. But naturally there's going to be those moments where you're kind of waiting for the next series to be released, and these days we want everything and we want it now, Barry. We don't want to wait for anything, and so when we run out of compelling entertainment, sometimes people will kind of pause their subscriptions, move on to something else, and then wait for it to come back. So Netflix have decided they want to start kind of innovating a little bit, and they are going to be offering mobile games to subscribers, which I thought was fascinating. Obviously, all of these games are going to be based on their titles. So, for example, you're going to have a Stranger Things Netflix game that you can play on your mobile. And this is obviously going to be kind of a multi-year effort. It's not going to happen straight away. But I think it's fascinating that they're kind of looking to gaming. Obviously, a lot of development in the space, and we just spoke about Barry being pulled into gaming when it was something that previously hasn't really ever pulled your interest. And so Netflix, obviously, realizing that people want to maybe be a bit more interactive as well, and not just always kind of sit and binge through their way through various series, and are looking to mobile gaming. What are your thoughts off the bat?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it shows that they're acknowledging that they're not just competing against the other streaming platforms. they're competing against any app that controls users' attention, right? That's
Yeah.
all it is. All entertainment is trying to do is control attention. And gaming is a huge vertical. It's absolutely ginormous across the world. And so if you're going to compete in the entertainment space, gaming is one of those things you kind of have to be a part of because of the scale and the amount of immersion that is possible. And what Netflix have at their fingertips, like you say, Chad, is the branding to be able to leverage the titles they have on their platform and really create niche experiences for those big communities. If you got really into a Netflix series and you invested hours and hours and hours into it, and you got involved with the characters and you kind of got caught up in the story, it makes a lot of sense that you might be interested in playing a game which continues that sort of
Sure.
branding, continues that sort of story. And so I can see lots of interesting developments there where you might see a series and a game being developed in parallel to kind of tie into one another and make that experience even more immersive and even more kind of
Yeah.
deep for the people watching. And so, yeah, like you say, it's going to take a couple of years to see what happens and see what these games look like. Of course, gaming is an entirely different thing to streaming, and so they're going to have to figure out exactly how to do it in a way that doesn't clutter the app or doesn't clutter the experience. What you don't want is you don't want to kind of cannibalize your own viewing of the other stuff you're making, right? You're
Yeah.
hoping to increase your viewing time. And it reminds us all that all these apps are trying to do is keep you in the app as long as possible, Chad. That's always the goal.
Absolutely, and we're not surprised by that. We've kind of learned that by now. But you're so right. This is totally about controlling our attention. But for me, it seems like a kind of a no-brainer, this move, because you've already got all of these story writers putting together these awesome scripts for the original content. Why not kind of repurpose it somewhat, but also allow fans to get closer to the level of detail to the stories, play the characters and feel more like they have something in common with these characters. And I can only think of it as being a positive if there is uptake. I mean, that said, a lot of people I know only use Netflix on their TVs or on kind of other streaming devices, where the mobile phone is not one of them. So whether it's going to be kind of a gimmick or actually picked up, I'm keen to see. Would you play any of these games, do you think, if one of your favorite original Netflix series were to introduce a game?
I don't know, Chad. It depends on the game, I think. I think all of this will depend on like how good the game is and how compelling it is. I'm not typically a gamer, so it's a difficult question to ask me because I don't play many games myself, and I'm not a big mobile gamer in any way. But I would imagine that if there was something that really was compelling and I kind of got caught up in it, you could find yourself playing that over like a lengthy period of time. And so, yeah, whether this can be on the app itself, whether it's going to be on the TV using some sort of, using your phone as a remote, or I don't know what, we'll have to wait and see. But I like your point that these storytellers are going to just shift the format that they're writing for, Chad.
Yeah.
Like if you look at some of the storytelling games out there at the moment, they switch between gameplay and these like cinematic 3D recreations of some sort of scene, right? So you could totally imagine in the middle of a series, Chad, doing the same thing but have this Netflix quality kind of live action, and then you controlling a player for a little bit, and then it gets to a certain part of a level, and then it shows you a 5-minute clip of a Netflix quality kind of series, and that's quite exciting to me. That could be a quite cool use case, and maybe even, Chad, where it's interactive in the sense like a choose your own adventure type thing. Like you can imagine a series being built that, depending on how you play the game and which way you go and what you do, it shows you different aspects of that universe, and it shows you different clips based on what you've done in the game, making it even more immersive than just watching it from a 2D perspective. And so I'm hoping that that's the sort of creativity we see, because that will make it really interesting and really compelling if they can get that right.
Absolutely. Just imagine the number of people. I mean, it wasn't a Netflix original, but just imagine you had something like the likes of Game of Thrones, and the number of people who would go through all of the various permutations, because some of these series, you get mega fans, and some of these stories are so great, to be able to kind of relate even closer. I'm definitely sure that a lot of people would. So yeah, that's something very exciting to watch up for Netflix in the future as well. But we're now going to move on to develop and grow.
Develop and grow.
Chad, we are well into week 3 of our level 4 lockdown here in South Africa, and
Yeah.
I've had a tough week. I'll be honest. In the first couple of days of this week, I haven't really felt like myself. I felt like a caged lion in some cases. I've had serious cabin fever, and it's been really tough to stay productive and stay kind of optimistic and happy in these moments. I found myself getting dragged down a bit just because I felt so stuck in this one place and sitting in the same chair, not being able to move, not being able to see friends, not being able to kind of get out and about. And I think that it's a reminder to me of how important some of the routines and some of the small things in my life are to kind of keeping me sane and keeping me going. I don't know about you, Chad, but when I have this kind of cabin fever that I had this last couple of days, everything else falls off the rails. My exercise kind of
Definitely.
falls away. My eating gets much worse. My social engagement, I'm not messaging friends anymore. I'm not phoning people anymore. I'm not kind of getting that social buzz. And that kind of snowballs your mood down and down and down, and you kind of get into this spiral that's difficult to get out of. And so I just wanted to bring it up and kind of raise it for discussion, Chad, to hear if you had any cool ideas or any experiences, because you've been through a lot of lockdown in the last couple of months, probably more than we have this side. And I think that cabin fever is something that everyone is struggling with right now, especially if you're in a country that still has some form of lockdown. And the psychological effects are serious. They really, really are
Mm.
tough. So, Chad, do you have any good advice for us? Any lessons or experiences from your side that maybe you used when you were in those moments?
Yeah, so just because I've spent a long period of time in lockdown does not mean I'm immune to lockdown, Barry. And you're so right. It is, the third one affected me really quite profoundly, and it doesn't help as well when you sort of picking up weight as well, and like you say, everything just falls off falls by the wayside, and you kind of just trying to survive at the end of the day, and it's really quite tough. In terms of tips and tricks, it's going to be everything that you know of already. You posted a wonderful 10-kilometer run, which I'm very proud of, Barry. So I would definitely say, if you can, more of that. Naturally, because we keep talking about how exercise keeps boosting the mood, and if you can see things from a positive angle, and you can kind of see that, cool, we've got 1 or 2 more weeks left, and we can hopefully then move on to an easier set of circumstances. I think it does make it a little bit easier when you have something to look forward to at the end. I think also, just all of that kind of virtual stuff. So we by now are sick and tired of doing everything virtually, but there is a lot to be said for some social interactions virtual, and less kind of texting on WhatsApp. It is sometimes exhausting and draining to try and keep track of 10 different conversations all happening at different times on WhatsApp. And so, like you have done in normal times anyway, Barry, it's a matter of rather scheduling those calls and having that kind of quality interpersonal communication. And obviously nothing beats the real thing. But some form of kind of video communication does definitely go a long way. And the other thing, and I kind of made a video of this during Christmas time last year, is just to remember that you're not alone. I think it's so easy to feel and to kind of resent the fact that you are alone, and it might feel like that as well when you're looking at your friends, like I say, who's in the UK or other parts of the world and who are able to do different things. It's exactly how I felt when I was in a very long lockdown, and you guys were doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things that I wish I could be doing. But ultimately, there are another. How many, sort of 60 million South Africans, or whatever the case is, who are also sitting in a lockdown situation, and ultimately are also trying to just do their part and try to come out of it in one piece on the other side. And so, if you kind of are able to just be in solidarity of everyone else who's going through it at the same time, you kind of feel less special in a way, and that's kind of the goal. It's kind of trying to, I know your thoughts and your feelings and everything are incredibly important, but at the same time, I think in these lockdown situations, you have to also look at the fact that you're not alone, and everyone else is feeling the exact same way. And so, yeah, I think if you can kind of frame it in that sort of way, it'll become a little bit easier. Not easy, but a little bit easier to get through, hopefully soon.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great tips, and I think that it's a nail on the head. Is that we all know all of this stuff, but it's so hard in those moments to convince yourself to get up off your chair and go for that run, right? Or to go outside and get some sun. Like I
Yeah.
found that even though I have a garden here at the house I'm in, and kind of I've got these spaces to go and use, I haven't been using it. I've been stuck on that chair and like haven't been found the energy or the motivation or whatever to get up and get out. And so whatever we can do to get those routines right, to get some sun on our skin, to eat some good food, to exercise, and to like you say, call your friends and chat to your friends when possible, that makes the world of difference. And hopefully that can help someone else out there who's in the same position as I've been in the last couple of days, which has just been going insane inside these walls and wishing I could go out and do the things that I want to do. So thanks for that, Chad. I appreciate it. The second thing I wanted to chat about is about more creativity. And so let me give you a little background. My sister sent me a new artist called Anson Sierra. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but that's his name. And he does these really, really intimate songs, just the piano and him. It's very kind of down, like ballads. It does very, very like chilled music. But some of the songwriting I was listening to was so powerful. His lyrics are amazing. And I really have been enjoying his music. I've been playing it over the last couple days. And what I was thinking about is when I was listening to his music, is that I started listening to the piano itself. And very quickly I realized his piano is super simple, Chad. It's just chords. It's literally just a
Okay.
chord, sing a line, a chord, sing a line, a chord, sing a line. Very, very basic music. And it made me realize, Chad, that I could write that. I could write that sort of music, right? And I've always held myself back because I've always wanted to write music, but I've always felt, oh, my piano's not really good enough. I don't really have the skill. I don't really have the resources to be able to go and write music. And so I, I think it's because I hear Jacob Collier. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what writing music has to be. I have to write like a Jacob song, right? And this is a good reminder to me that no, that's just an excuse I'm making. And that in creativity, you can start with the simplest thing. You don't have to be Mozart. You don't have to be an insane songwriter to get started.
Yep.
All it takes is 4 chords and a couple lines of poetry, Chad, and you've got yourself a song. And so I thought I'd bring that up because it kind of hit me this week, and I've kind of been inspired. I want to go and write some super simple music and just kind of get over that fear of my piano's not good enough or my songwriting's not good enough. It's like, no, that's nonsense. Just write the song, and then over time you get better and you can get more complicated if you need to. But this guy's music is beautiful. It is emotional. It's compelling, and it's 4 chords, Jed.
There's something so beautiful about simplicity, and we all are drawn to that simplicity. But yet, like you say, when we feel like we want to do something ourselves, all of a sudden, too simple is not good enough. I mean, even when you're doing a presentation or you're reading something, you want to read fast, sound smart, and ultimately. Basics is all that matters. I mean, it reminds me of a conversation we had, Barry, where I think Shawn Mendes was asked by someone, what does it take to be a songwriter? And the response was just kind of just write. And I think that's the whole thing. Is I think you and I, in a lot of facets of life, live in our heads quite a lot, to the point where we don't actually sit down and try. And this happens to me so often, Barry, so often, where I feel like before I can, start taking photos or do whatever the case is, I need to have like a workflow in place, and it needs to be like the slickest workflow. So, if I don't know where to store the files, surely I won't be able to even edit the photo. Like I won't even be able to, to do that. And so you're just kind of jumping 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead, completely unnecessarily. And it's just a matter of sitting down and, like you say, kind of just doing your thing. And it also reminds me of the Beatles, some of their music, which is exceptionally simple, but it's timeless, and it's you'll never be able to beat it. And yeah, I mean, I guess where we do have a musical prodigy that hits the earth every now and then. We've got Jacob Collier, and you'll kind of try and play a guitar song by like Jimi Hendrix or something, and you're like, well, we've got to kind of match this level. For that 1 or 2 prodigies who have kind of been there before us, there are thousands of exceptionally talented musicians who have created beautiful stuff that is very simple. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. So yeah, I love that kind of recognition, Barry. Thanks for bringing that through. So have you taken the piano out as on the back of this, and have you written down one or two lines?
I haven't just yet, Chad. I only discovered this guy 2 days ago. So it's going to be a little weekend project for me. I think I'm going to take some time on the weekend and kind of
Nice.
get to it. I've got a bunch of lyrics. I've been writing for years, like you know, and so I've got notebooks full of stuff, and I've got bits and pieces. And so maybe I'll dig some of those out and see if I can turn one of those into something. And just remind myself that I don't have to compare myself to like musicians who've been doing it for 20 years. It's really unfair of me to look at a polished like pop star musician who's writing like world-changing music and be like, okay, cool. If I can't make that, then it's not even worth trying. It's such a silly mindset, but that's how we think often. It's like, no, I think you have to realize that in order for that person to get there, they wrote 1,000 terrible songs before they got to those hits, right? And that's kind of what you have to go through. Is you have to realize that it's just about the process. It's about using that inspiration, and even if you only know 2 chords, you can make a song. Even if you only know a couple things on the guitar, you can make a song. And all that's holding you back is yourself. No one else is holding you back. And so hopefully this weekend, Chad, maybe next week I'll report back on some of the progress and see how it went. But I'd love to try and spend some time this weekend and just kind of prove to myself that I can do it. That's almost the thing. It's like break through that barrier and prove to myself that I can write something, and I can write something that sounds okay, and then build on that foundation.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing that, Barry. Hopefully we'll hear some of that soon. I'm also looking forward to hearing your vocals for the Shawn Mendes track that I sent you more than 6 months ago. How long ago was that?
Oh, Chad, I knew you were going to throw me under the bus on that one. I do apologize. It is on my to-do list, but it's very stale and very old, like you say. So I better get on that, because I know the Cross the Pond listeners are waiting with bated breath. So let me get on that as well, Chad. I promise I'll get it to you soon. I promise.
Not at all. Just teasing. Whenever you got to be in the mood to do these kind of things. So you pick up the shiny project, rather, Barry. Do that, and when the time feels right, it's all good. But when you are songwriting, I've been googling it. I think it's right. But the circle of fifths is a great tool to pick kind of chords that work together. So certainly give it a good Google search if you don't know where to start. It's a good place. It's a good place to start. Barry, I think that's us for today, to be honest.
It was a good episode. Thanks, Chad. I really enjoyed it. And even with all the technical difficulties at the beginning, I think we still had a lot to chat about, and I really enjoyed the conversation. If you're listening to us right now, or you're watching us right now, thank you so much again for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. This is one of my favorite parts of the week, Chad. It's always good to catch up, buddy.
Absolutely, completely agree. Well, as always, we will see you again next week. Do make sure you subscribe to all of our social media channels. If ever you want to watch this, if you're listening to this right now, there's always a link in every single episode. Click down below to kind of switch to video. And of course, we haven't had enough What's on Your Mind in the last 6 months. So just fire us a little voice note, please. There's another link in all of our episodes when you're watching this or listening to this. Just fire us a voice note of whatever you're thinking. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question. Whatever is on your mind, we want to hear from you. So that's a great place to do that. Anyway, enough talking. We'll see you again next week.
Across the pond.